So we were dealing with the 16th mantra. Before that, it is a very important one. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyati. In the 16th mantra, we were discussing the prayer of a spiritually oriented man who had led a good life, who had been worshipping Surya or the sun god as the creator and sustainer of this world and the regulator of this world. These three verses, 16, 17 and 18, they constitute the prayer that naturally comes to a spiritual aspirant who has led a pure life. Before entering this subject again, I must explain what is meant by death in the Vedic Upanishad literature. I think I mentioned earlier, in Vedic or Upanishadic scheme of life, existence is conceived not as a straight line progression, but as a cycle. Now, we don't know where a cycle, or a wheel rather, you don't know where it begins, and we don't know where it ends. Every point is a beginning and end and middle also. So, and this is applicable to human life and also the entire creation. At the micro level, every living being is moving through this cycle, and this is a common philosophy which binds Buddhism and Hindu philosophy together. Two important concepts. One is the theory of reincarnation, rebirth, and the law of karma. These two are interrelated, and these two ideas are common in both Buddhism and also Vedic or Upanishadic scheme of life. Our present life is the result of our past actions, and our present actions determine the life which is to come in future. And when a man realizes that he is something beyond this entity which comes and goes, when he realizes that he is something beyond this jiva or individual soul which rotates along with this wheel, when he realizes that he is something distinct from this, he realizes that he is the soul, the Atman, the supreme reality, supreme consciousness. The other way is also correct. When he realizes that he is a supreme consciousness, he comes out of this veil. But this is possible only when he develops detachment. Detachment here should be understood to mean non-attachment. When he performs his work without any desire, when he is established in unselfishness, when he is not bound by any desire, when he doesn't define in his life in terms of material achievement, at that point he comes out of this way. So long as he considers himself to be an entity which is born in this world to do certain things, to enjoy certain things, so long as this feeling exists, he is rotating like this wheel. Now, there are three types of liberation, or rather three states of Atman, purely from eschatological point of view, what happens after death. These are mentioned in the Upanishad literature. One is called, in Sanskrit, it is called Dhumadi Marga. I shall explain this. Sometimes it's called Krishna Gati. Now, anybody who lives a selfish life, who performs everything with a strong attachment, with strong motive, who can never think of anything beyond the empirical. He does something with a definite motive, which he wants to enjoy. Such people are said to follow the path of clouds. In English can be called the path of clouds. So the Vedic or Paurani literature says when a selfish man dies, when his body is burned, there will be a lot of smoke coming out. And when a spiritually enlightened person dies, when his body is burnt, there will be effulgent light, and the flame will be very effulgent. This has been often noticed in all cremation rituals of some spiritually elevated personalities. You don't ask the question what happens when we send a body to the electric machine where everything is burnt away. That's a different matter. This is an old concept, mind you, but we can see some logic behind. So the second path is called Archiradi Marga. Archi actually means an effulgent flame. See, when something is burning, if there is effulgent flame, there will be a curve at the end of the flame. This is called Archi. Means it is associated with light, associated with enlightenment, and associated with knowledge and whiteness. This is what happens to a man who is enlightened, who leads a selfless life, who is established in unselfishness, and who performs religious penances, puja or worship or meditation or prayer or whatever may be. Such a man follows the path of flame, path of light. It is called Archiradi Marga in Sanskrit. I won't load you with too many technical terms. So in the Gita you find Agnir Jyoti Rakashukla Shanmasa Uttarayanam Tatra Prayata Gechanti Brahma Vido Janaha. You find this verse in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It describes the path taken by a relatively enlightened man, not a liberated man, but by a man who has led a virtuous life based on righteousness, good deeds and unselfishness. This is called, sometimes it is called Uttarayana Marga. Uttara means north, the path leading towards the north. So the name is Uttarayana Marga, or the path of light, the path of effulgence, etc. They reach a higher level. They pass through different levels of existence. And then gradually they are liberated, not immediately. But those who have led a selfish life, those who never thought of anything beyond the empirical, the phenomenal, the worldly things, they follow the path of clouds. Sometimes it is called, Dhumadi Marga in sense. That also comes in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Dhumo ratris tatha Krishna shanmasa dakshinayanam tatra chandramasam jyoti yogi prapya nivartate. These are the two parts followed by ordinary people. Those who lead a very unselfish life, those who are relatively enlightened, those who have a transcendental idea of existence, those who are not satisfied with food, clothing, and everything that is related to worldly life, those who have gone beyond this desire, they follow the path of light. And those who are just the opposite, people who are immersed in worldliness, not very different from animals. Animals, of course, they don't plan, they don't scheme, they don't organize. But otherwise, a very efficient man who is engrossed in worldliness and selfishness is not very different from animals. But animals need enjoyment at the physical level, at the instinct level. Man wants to enjoy at the mental and intellectual level. But that again is related to the enjoyment at the bodily level. These are two parts. Now, a third path is explained in the Upanishad. That's what we are coming to. All these are mentioned here. The third path is called, in some ways called Jivan Mukti, means liberation when you are living in this world. Not a post-mortem attainment. Liberation right in this world. Is it possible for one to live in this world, perform all the duties and responsibilities of a common man, and still be liberated? It may be contradiction terms, but Upanishad says it is possible. So Jivan api mukta means somebody who is liberated even when he is alive. When they live in this world, for all practical purposes, or in the eyes of an outsider, they may be leading a physical life. They also need food, they also need water when they are thirsty or hungry. They also need protection from sunlight and rain. That's true. But when they live in this world, they look at this world not as a participant in the play of worldly life, but as a spectator. Just as you watch a drama being played out on a stage, you are not a participant in the drama. That is the attitude of the Jivan Muktas. A number of examples can be cited in the history of Vedantic tradition. The latest perhaps is Sri Ramakrishna, and later in 20th century, some of you must have heard about Ramana Maharshi. And there are still many, even after Ramana Maharshi also there have been quite a few. But Ramana Maharshi is an example. Perhaps he is relatively more well known in today's, because he lived close to our own times. He passed away around maybe 1954, around that time. So 54, 52. Now if you look at this picture, you find his eyes are blazing, his eyes are looking at something distant. He's not staring at anybody. Some people, like psychiatrists, would say, if you go to a mental asylum, you find people staring at you. Their eyes are not focused on any specific object. It is possible in mania and all that. But psychiatrists give one important distinction between an enlightened man who may appear to be somewhat abnormal and a really abnormal man. And in the face of an abnormal man, there will be a dark shadow. Because his attention, his mind is not focused on something which is effulgent. There is confusion, conflicts, chaos, dilemmas flashing through his mind. So there will be restlessness, and restlessness associated with chaotic, darkened expression. But you look at the Ramana Maharshi's picture. He was living in this world, he was behaving like a, he sometimes used to cook also. And he was very humorous also. Very, very, very humorous. But When he was staring at something, still his mind was focused on, concentrated upon something transcendental. That's why there is so much effulgence on his face. This is Jivan Mukta. Sometimes one of the very eminent monks in the Ramakrishna mission, he was a disciple of Swami Brahmananda. That eminent monk, he was the founder of our centers in France, in Paris, and also Germany. His name was Swami Siddheswarananda, a very enlightened, highly learned monk of the earlier generations. He was the disciple of Swami Brahmananda. He was one of the pioneers in revealing the greatness of Ramana Maharshi. In fact, he went there to interview him and published an article in a well-known newspaper in India. It's called Hindu newspaper. So you find such people. They live in this world. For all, in the eyes of common people, you find there is nothing special about them. But those who go to them, those who read their writings, or those who listen to their talks, you find there is something transcendental. Such people are liberated even when they are alive. Even in their informal conversations, there it comes out. I can give an example. Once it so happened, Ramana Maharshi was living, and two cooks started quarreling among them in the kitchen. Ramana Maharshi was living, the room where he was staying was very close to the kitchen. So these cooks, workers, when they start quarreling, they will take some pitchforks or some other utensils with big spoons which are used in kitchen, and they will start fighting. And one fellow was asking the other fellow, "Do you know who I am?" And the other fellow countered, "Do you know who I am?" The Ramana Maharshi slowly approached them. That is the very question we are trying to answer. Who am I? This question. And that's how Ramana Maharshi's method of self-analysis is, who am I? You find that's the book. Now, so even in mundane matters, in empirical, purely worldly things, they can bring down that the light of spiritual realization. And those fellows started laughing, and they stopped. They buried the hatchet. So this is, just imagine. So these three paths are described in the Upanishadic literature. Towards the end of this Upanishad, that is 18th verse, the spiritual aspirant prays to the sun god for taking him through the higher path so that he can have the vision of the transcendental reality. He prays to be taken beyond the relative, beyond the empirical. This is how the Upanishad ends. And before that, I have already mentioned last time, the devotee slowly evolved from the lower levels of spiritual practices, from pantheistic, polytheistic, henotheistic, monotheistic, and ultimately he prays for the highest monistic realization. I already mentioned last time, that's how a man's concept of God evolves. First, he thinks that entire creation, the world itself, is God. Because if you look at the world, it is puzzling. If you try to analyze every little bit of worldly events, even things that happen in our daily life, if you analyze one after another, 1, 2, 3, then you will find you can never come to the end of the journey. You can never come to a definite answer. That's the problem with modern science. Science is trying to explain the world from a purely analytical point of view. And it is never possible. One after another, you cannot solve the mystery of life. But you can very easily solve the problem if you look at the world as a single substance. And the Vedantic explanation of the world is that world is nothing but a play. I already explained last time. You don't go for a definite plan behind a play. A play doesn't have a purpose. So the world as it exists, if you approach it from a philosophical, spiritual point of view, you can say it is something beyond description. Then the problem is solved. But if you try to explain the world bit by bit, then there is no end to the end, because the world is expanding, the universe is expanding, the galaxies are expanding. So how many stars and how many planets are in the world, nobody knows. How can you count the total number of bacteria? You cannot. So from a micro point of view, there is no end to the investigation. From a macro point of view, it is not worth investigating things one after another, 1, 2, 3 in this manner. The whole thing is nothing but a play. So this devotee, first he leaves behind a pantheistic level, and then he looks for an ultimate reality behind the phenomena, the cosmic phenomena. And then he thought, well, these various phenomena are guided and regulated by so many individual divine principles. This is polytheism. And then ultimately he comes to the conclusion that sun is the supreme reality. There are two important symbols which are used in these literature. One is sun, the other is Omkara, Pranava. Third one you find very often called Agni. There are 3 symbols you find here: Agni, Surya and Pranava. So you find here, towards the end you find it is stated here, Om Kridosmara Kritam Smara. So Omkara comes, then Surya comes, that is sun, and also Agni. So these are different symbols. Agni and Surya, these are 2 different ideas of God mentioned in the Rigvedic literature. Omkara is a higher symbol. Omkara comes very close to symbolize the indescribable reality. A, U, Ma. In Sanskrit language, these 3 letters constitute Omkara. Om, you find a symbol, you find Omkara. A, U and Ma. This Omkara, or Pranava sometimes it is called Om, it symbolizes our entire concept of wisdom and experience. All that we can know of, all the supreme knowledge or wisdom that we can conceive of, and all the experience that we can conceive of in waking state, in dream state, and in deep sleep states, all these are included in Omkara. So, Akara symbolizes the experience related to waking state, Ukara symbolizes the experience related to dream states, and Makara symbolizes the experience related to deep sleep states, and the entire idea of knowledge, learning and experience are contents in Omkara. But it also points to the supreme reality beyond this. See, as I said, our whole knowledge can be analyzed in terms of what we experience when we are awake and what we experience when we are dreaming and our experience of deep sleep. These are the only 3 experiences we can think of. Either we are awake, or when we go to sleep, or we go to sleep. While sleeping, we will either dream or we will be immersed in deep sleep. These are the 3 states of human experience. what we experience in waking state is different from what we experience in dream state. But it cannot be completely separated or different. There will be some connection. While dreaming, we may reach from San Francisco to Chicago within split second. In waking state, it may require 6 hours. That's all. So there is the difference with regard to time. And also we may go to sleep here. When we are awake, we are here, we go to sleep here. When we dream, we may dream that we have reached perhaps another planet. So there is the difference with regard to space. And our waking experiences are rather gross in nature, because we need the 5 senses of perception and also the senses of action plus mind. Then only we can have experience in waking state. In dream state, we can have these experiences purely at the mental level without any participation by any of the 5 senses, either senses of perception or senses of action. So one is gross, other is subtle. But in deep sleep state, we don't have an experience that we are aware of. We have the experience, but we are aware of that experience only when we come out of this deep sleep. That's a Vedantic analysis. All these are included in Omkara. But it also points out something beyond this. One reality or Atman which is present when we are in the waking state, and present when we are in dream state, and also present when we are in deep sleep states. That is what is indicated by Omkara. And this Omkara symbolizes the transcendental reality, the reality which is beyond form, beyond name, beyond definition, beyond description, which cannot be called either sun or fire or anything. So Omkara is only a symbol. It is not the name of the absolute reality. It points to something which is even beyond that. The devotee who has led a very happy and also virtuous life ultimately prays his Ishta, means the God whom he has been praying to, whom he has been worshipping all his life. Please show me your transcendental nature. When I see your form, it is only the empirical nature. Please show me your ultimate, transcendental, formless nature. And when that reality is realized, then the devotee realizes that the supreme truth in that reality is not essentially different from himself. It is called Purusha. That's the end of the mantra. I find Purusha Sohamasmi. This term also comes here in this part of the Upanishad, the concluding portion, 16, 17 and 18 portion. The word Purusha Sohamasmi. The devotee says, the supreme truth, which is the essence of, which is the indweller in the Surya, in the sun god, is non-distinct and non-different from the supreme truth, which is the indweller in me also. That is the ultimate experience of oneness, of spiritual unity. That is how the Upanishad concludes. The term is called Purusha. That I shall explain, then I will come to 16, 17, 18 mantras. The word Purusha is used here. That it is a very important concept in Upanishadic Vedantic philosophy. The word Purusha is defined and is analyzed from 2 different angles in the works of commentators, in the Shankara's, in the Bhashyas, the commentaries of Shankara, Ramanuja and others. One definition is that Purusha means the indweller, the immanent reality which is present in everything in this world, in every being in this world. So Purishete iti Purushaha, that is the definition. Puri means city. Let us say, well, just imagine, I'll explain this point. You are sitting in a room. When you say that you are sitting in a room, it is obvious that you are different and distinct from the room. This body is like a room, like a city. And the soul is resident, sitting within this body. Which means that soul, the Atman or Supreme Consciousness, is distinct and different from this body. Just as when you are sitting in a room, it is obvious that you cannot be the same as the room. You should be distinct and different. So, room you may change, but your essence you don't change. So, this body is something perishable. This Atman, the Supreme Consciousness, is Sete, means it is lying, it is sleeping. It is residing within this body-mind complex. So this Atman, the Supreme Consciousness, it is the resident, it is the indweller in everything in this world. It is immanent in everything in this world. That is one description of the word Purusha. The other description of the word Purusha, explanation of the word Purusha, is Purnatvat Purushaha. Purnatva means perfection or completeness. Perfection or completeness. Purusha is conceived as a term used to denote one important characteristic of the Supreme Reality. It is perfect in itself. Perfection, in the word perfection, it is not exactly a very accurate translation of the word Purusha, but for want of, in the philosophy of language or in language of philosophy, both you find here. This is a problem with for any philosopher. Even if you translate the works of empiricists or even utilitarians, the Hume, if you were translate the works of Hume into another language, Bentham or J.S. Mill into another, these are all empiricists, mind you. Nothing transcendental about their philosophy. Even that is difficult. So how much more difficult it would be to translate transcendental ideas from one language, that to a language like Sanskrit, into English language. There is also a problem of the language of philosophy. That is there. But still I can explain. Purnatva Purusha means the idea of the concept of completeness of perfection. Which means that Purusha, it remains the same without any change in the past, in the present and future. Means it is timeless. You can think of time only if there is change between what it was in the past and what it is now and what it will be in future. The idea of time is irrelevant while explaining something which is beyond time. It is not within time, but which is beyond time. So Purusha is the timeless, the ultimate reality, which remains unchanging in the past, in the present and future. And it remains unchanging in the waking state, in the dream state, and also in the deep sleep state. So, Purusha is conceived to be the ultimate reality. And any great spiritual person who has realized the truth that he is Purusha will be established in a natural serenity and tranquility. I can give an example. Many of you may be familiar. There is a famous book, Bhagavata Purana, one of the most important of the 18 Mahapuranas. The Sri Krishna is described as well known, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, means Krishna is the Lord himself. Because he is Purna. Purna means Purusha. He is the Purusha. So Purnatvat Purusha. So if you read either Gita or Bhagavata Purana, many of these books, one important characteristic of Krishna is that he never laughs and he is never sad and he never doubts. When the entire Pandavas, the Pandava army was facing a great crisis because mighty warriors of those days were assembled in the opposite camp, Bhishma, Karna and others, Drona and others. All the Pandavas were a bit perturbed, but Krishna, who was on the Pandavas' side, was not perturbed. And when he had to bless the great devotees who prayed to him, then also he was smiling. When a great crisis came, then also he was smiling. There was always it is not a worldly smile, it is a spiritual transcendental smile. The smile of a man who can see the past, present and future as a single dimension of time. See, if you know that your problems will come to an end tomorrow, then you won't be too sad when you are facing the problem today. And if you know that your happy condition which you are enjoying now will not be there tomorrow, then also you will not be overjoyed. So when you are aware of the entire experience which is spread out within these 3 points of time, past, present and future, you will not doubt, you will not be overjoyed, and you will not be sad, you will not be grief-stricken. You will be perfectly established in an equanimity of mind. Krishna himself says, yogastha kuru karmani sangam tektva adhananjaya siddhya siddho samo bhutva samattam yoga uchyate. Yoga is explained as that state of mind when your mind remains in a state of perfect equanimity, no matter what happens tomorrow. This is the characteristic of a yogi. Now, the devotee prays, you can find towards the last, yes, in the 16th verse you find here, the devotee prays. The prayer is this: Pushan Ekarshe Yama Surya Prajapatya Resmin Vyuha, etc. O sun, it's called, see, Pushan Ekarshe Yama Surya Prajapatya Vyuha Resmin Samuha Tejo Yette Rupam Kalyanatamam Tatte Pasyami Yosau Aso Purusha Sohamasmi. The devotee concludes, I shall come to sloka again. The devotee concludes, Te Kalyanatamam Rupam Aham Pasyami. I am seeing in front of me that effulgent form of yours, that auspicious form of yours. That means when the form which is naturally revealed, when the golden risk of name and form, the golden risk of empirical or relative reality is removed, I can see the transcendental reality of yours. That's what I'm seeing in front of me. So the sun as a visible entity has vanished, but the sun, the transcendental reality, is manifesting in front of this devotee. So he says, no, I am seeing in front of me your auspicious, your effulgent form. What is that form? That form is Purusha. You are in your true nature, you are the Purusha. Means the immanent reality and also the transcendental reality and omniscient reality. So the devotee says that Purusha is yourself. And that Purusha is the immanent reality, the indweller within me as well. That is Jiva Brahma Aikyam, as it is called in Advaita philosophy, the experience of unity. The aspirant realizes that, the worshipper realizes that he is non-different from the reality whom he was worshipping till now, whom he is praying to till now. And that is the ultimate experience. When that experience comes, the cycle comes to an end. The shackles break up. Then the individual soul realizes that he is beyond this empirical relative entity which comes and goes, which is born, which lives, which dies and reborn. No, it is something beyond that. This is the experience explained here. So, Pushan Ekashe, I shall explain the verb, the prose form. Hey Pushan. Pushan actually means the one who nourishes. Pushnati iti Pusha is an addressing term to Surya. Because Surya is the one which nourishes, which sustains in their world. Without sunlight there can be no existence. Everything will vanish, fade away. It is sun that is responsible for the existence of this world. So it is called Pushan. Again, Ekarshe means the one who travels alone. Because the devotee looks upon the sun god as the supreme God with form. Here one may ask this question, this may naturally come from a practical point of view. These terms are used in the ancient Vedic literature, the Surya, Agni, etc. Means sun god, fire god, etc. We must always remember in the Upanishadic or Vedantic literature, in the Vedic literature, different names are given. God, the reality is called many names. We must always remember these names they are not the proper names of the ultimate reality. These terms are used in different Vedic hymns. The Rigveda is the mother of the entire Vedic literature. Rigveda must have taken 2-3 millennia to evolve. So over so many centuries, different Vedic sages and seers who meditated upon the supreme reality in different places, in different ways, without necessarily following a specific pattern, realized the supreme reality as Surya, Agni, etc. But beyond that, they also realized all these are different names which are used to call the reality which has no name at all. That reality has no name because that reality is based on our spiritual inner experience. And the experience cannot be described. It has no name at all. So that should be understood very clearly. In a way, this 16th verse marks the evolution of the devotee from a monotheistic to a monistic concept of supreme reality. Monotheism implies the belief in a supreme God who is a creator and sustainer and regulator of the entire world. Monism implies the ultimate principle of which this monotheistic God is but a dimension, or it is a symbol. Because a man travels from the idea of duality and then he ends his journey when he reaches the idea of the reality without a name and form. And then he realizes that the God whom he was praying to is after all the indweller in himself. This experience of unity of existence, Swami Vivekananda explains this experience in a very striking sentence you find in the Practical Vedanta. There he says it is this idea of unity of existence which is the only criterion, which is the only justification for morality in this world. As I said many times earlier, the infinite oneness of the experience of the infinite oneness of the reality is the eternal sanction of all morality, all ethics, and all good actions in this world. This is Swamiji states. If the whole creation is one spiritual entity, we cannot do anything wrong. We cannot hurt anyone, because by hurting another man, we are hurting ourselves. We should not hurt our neighbor, not because God will send us to hell, but because by hurting our neighbor, we are spiritually hurting ourselves. This is the Vedantic justification for the ultimate morality. That experience is implied here. Pashyami. Aham kalyanatamam rupam pashyami. I am now experiencing, I am seeing that auspicious form of yours. Which is not a form. It is the reality of formlessness. Means here, which you understood, I am experiencing. You cannot experience a form, mind you. Experience has no form. When you say I am experiencing the vision of a picture or a rock, actually I am seeing at the mental level the rock. I am not experiencing. The experience cannot have any description, any explanation, anything. A great Christian theologian, Master Eckhart, who lived in the 14th century, he comes very close to this Advaitic idea of experience being beyond description and definitions. So that is the conclusion which comes in the 16th verse. So then we will come to the 17th. The 17th verse, that also is a prayer. You find here the signs of death is mentioned here in a way. Vayuranilam amrudam athedam bhasmantam shariram om kratosmara kritam smara kratosmara kritam smara. Here the devotee is about to breathe his last. So he says, let my last breath be immersed in that ultimate transcendental spiritual experience. Maybe my body will be reduced to ashes, but let my breath means here, vayu means his consciousness. Let my consciousness experience its ultimate unity, identity with the supreme spiritual consciousness, supreme God, in other words. Then he asks his own mind, oh my mind, please remember your old deeds, your past deeds. You always remember your past deeds. This is very important from the point of view of life, In our Vedantic tradition, it is said that what we feel, what we strongly feel at the last moment, when we are breathing the last, decides our next life. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajityande kalayabaram tam tame vaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavita. In the Gita, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, whatever we think of, whatever we remember, whatever we fix our mind on while breathing our last decides our post-mortem destiny. Now this may from a superficial point of view, this may look a bit ridiculous, but it is very philosophical and very real. Now what will be our thoughts when we have no control over our mind? Generally, a diplomat or salesman or a sales executive or those who have to do a lot of public relations will be specially programmed, tutored and trained to smile, artificial smile. I ask you, how are you? Though that fellow may be suffering from stomach pain, he may be leading a miserable life, but he has to smile nicely and he has to put up a good face. That's part of existence. Now, that's because he has perfect control over, from a purely worldly or empirical point of view. He has controlled his facial expressions, his actions, his movements, everything. That's why he is able to put up altogether an artificial expression on the face. That is part of a salesman, diplomat. He has to smile. Even two countries who may be at war, you find they smile much more heartily. Their words will be much more sweet, in fact, than other people, normal people. So this is part of diplomacy. But when a man's senses are weak, mind is weak, under control, then what he has within comes out. You may be a well-trained diplomat, but that won't work when your mind is weak, when your senses are weak. It won't work. What is within comes out. Now, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, in another context, draws our attention to this phenomenon. In the Gospel, Sri Ramakrishna says, see, a parrot may be trained to take the name of God if his owner is a great devotee. Suppose a great devotee who chants God's name very loudly in the morning and evening, maybe several times a day, and if a parrot is trained, parrot is sitting, the parrot may also learn to take the name of that holy, Krishna, Rama, Jesus, Buddha, who may be. But when a cat appears, the parrot won't take that name. Then it produces its natural sound. Because his immediate need is to get protection from the cat. So then only people who come and help it. Now, similarly, that is what the example Sri Ramakrishna gives. Similarly, when a man is facing the end of his life, when his mind is weak, disturbed, indriyas, senses are weak, then what his true nature really comes out. And what really happens, if his memory is retained, his mind will go back to his past deeds. And if he has led a very good, pure, moral life, those memories will come out. If he had led the life of a crook, all the wicked deeds that he might have committed will flash back into mind. Nobody can help it. Even if he is a well-trained diplomat, this is true of everyone. So what happens? His mind automatically goes back to his past deeds. And if he had led a very pure, virtuous, righteous life, then all the good deeds of his life will come to the mind. And his mind will be remembering those deeds. And then his next life will be also a blessed. He will be able to lead a blessed life in the next life also. Because he begins from where he ends in this life. That's how it happens. So, the thoughts and ideas that flash in our mind when we die will be the totality of all the actions that we have done in our life till that moment. See, I can give the example of Mahatma Gandhi. Maybe it's one of the most striking example, because everyone knows, his life, and newspapers also reported. When Gandhiji was shot, he chanted the name of Ram, Ram very loudly, which means his mind was dwelling on the thought of Ram. He was a devotee of Sri Ramachandra. His mind was always dwelling. Maybe he was not physically uttering that name. Mind was always immersed in the contemplation of Ram. So when you're shot, when you're sure that life was coming to an end, he was not frightened. Otherwise people will be frightened, they will cry, they will weep. In fact. But Gandhiji was not frightened. Gandhiji was not scared. He uttered the name of Ram and breathed his last. That is the totality of the life he had led. It means he was doing everything with a sense of surrender of his whole life, of all his actions, to the feet of Ram. This is true of Jesus Christ when he was crucified, and all this happens. All the great men, you find here. Shankaracharya in his life, he walked away just. With a smile he walked away when he knew that his divine play was coming to an end. His disciples followed him right up to the Himalayas, means about 17,000 feet above, nearly 15,000 feet above sea level. Shankaracharya just walked away and vanished. It wasn't going from one place to another, just going for an evening walk. With that sense, with that kind of relaxation, he walked away, walked out of this life rather. This is what happens to a man who leads a virtuous life. So here in this mantra, the devotee says, he prays, Vayu Amrutam Anilam Atha Idam Shariram Bhasmantam. That's very important. He says, let my breath be immersed in the totality of the breath principle. Prana, it's called. That's prana is that dimension of the supreme energy which functions in this body. And when the body is broken and the body goes away, the prana of the breath principle which activates this body goes back to its original cosmic principle. This body is deprived of the energy. And also, then what happens? Body naturally, in Hindu tradition, in Indian tradition, body will be burned into ashes. And the body will be turned into bhasmantam sharira, means the body is endowed with an end in the form of ashes. That is the literal meaning. It means ultimately everything will be reduced to ashes. But then he turns to himself, turns to his mind. Om Krato. Now look here, my mind. Smara, remember. What should the mind remember? Kratam Smara. Whatever you have done. Whatever. Here not only, it's not actions alone that are implied or denoted. Words, thoughts, actions, everything is implied. Remember all the previous deeds. All, not only physical actions, but mental actions, mental thoughts, speculations, words, all. You remember all this. Remember all those auspicious deeds. That's what the devotee means. Remember all those auspicious deeds that you had done in previous life. Now you will be able to remember, you will be able to turn your mind back to those auspicious deeds only if your mind is established in auspiciousness. Otherwise, mind will not go back to an auspicious thought. If the mind was established, mind was full of evil thoughts, then we may say at the time of death my mind will go back. No, it's not possible. At the time of death, the totality will come to the surface. You have no control over what you think. You have no control of the expressions on your mind. It automatically comes. You will be helpless. So whatever you have done in the past, and more important, the attitude with which you have done those things will come to the surface. It is the attitude, the mental attitude behind actions, that decides the nature of actions. Not actions as such, but rather the attitude which regulated and shaped the actions. That's what is implied here. It will be automatically flashing in your mind when your breathing last. So the devotee requests his own mind, asks his own mind, look here, my mind, think of your auspicious deeds. But that is possible only if we had led a pure life. Because then only he can think of a bright post-mortem destiny. That's what if his mind was immersed in God, then it will automatically come. Mind will automatically goes back to that mind. So there is an interesting story again, the Puranic literature. An old man was dying, but his life was somewhat mixed. In the beginning of his life, maybe till he reached the 30th or 35th year, he led a very pure life, very moral life. But later, he started deviating from the proper path. He did many undesirable things. At the end of the life, he was frightened. What will happen to him? But he had a son. His son had an auspicious name. The son's name was the name of Vishnu, Narayana is called. So he was perhaps calling his son, please come and give me drinking water or something. Whatever it may be having. These Puranic stories, mythological stories, should not be taken literally, but they do have a great symbolic significance. That is what the author of the Puranas himself clearly states again and again. So he called his son, his name was Narayana, son's name. And that also is the name of Vishnu, the supreme god in the Vaishnavi tradition, Hindu pantheon. So immediately Vishnu appears and takes him to his auspicious celestial world. That's the Purana, that's the mythological story says, what it says. Now how was it that he was taken to the celestial world by the divine messengers, though he didn't lead a moral life towards the end of his life? The idea is this, he could not have uttered that divine name, even by mistake, if his mind was completely immersed in evil thoughts. Because he had led a very pure life for many years, in the early part of his life, those good thoughts came to the surface. So, he got he was taken to the celestial world. So all the other deeds were completely left out of his mind, and the good deeds that he had done, because he became completely repentant. He began to think of his past, and then suddenly those auspicious deeds which he might have done in the beginning of his life came to the surface, and his son also was there. So that deed took him to the highest celestial world. That is the idea behind. That's why the Bhagavata Purana itself says the ultimate goal of human existence is to be able to leave this world with God's name in mind. That is in the last breath. That is what the Purana says. I already quoted, I explained this earlier. We'll continue the subject again. I must remind you now, next class will be the last class on the Ishavasya Upanishad. We'll conclude this Upanishad in the next class. And after that, after next Friday, I shall try to answer your questions. If there are questions, you can write them on a piece of paper and leave on the table at the back of this auditorium.